Welcome back, everyone. Once again, we are here in beautiful Montenegro. So we're looking at this great bay. We're in Herceg-Novi, and we have a nice view today. Great weather, and it is September. So anyway, we're going to talk today about the subject of possibly investing in real estate in Montenegro, and whether you may want to do that. So before we get started, if you want all the greatest tips, click the subscribe button, smash the subscribe button, whatever. Click the notification bell to get notified. Feel free to check out our other videos, and let's dive in. Okay, so I'm actually fairly bullish on Montenegro as a place to invest broadly. Now, of course, there's many different micro markets within a larger market, and so you have to kind of pay attention one by one. But in my view, it's actually quite an interesting place to be. So why is that? Well, you can kind of just take a look. Like, you have this beautiful seaside, and you have mountains. And the sea and the mountains come together like this. What does this mean? It means it's very geographically constrained throughout much of it. Now, there's parts in the north, I would say I would not invest there. I think the north is a horrible place to invest because they have lots of space. Same thing, I probably wouldn't invest in Podgorica. Again, that's the capital, great, there's more services there, the airport, the biggest airport is there, but the reality is just there's a lot of space there, plenty of area to spread out. So it's unlikely, from my perspective, that the prices are going to come up. And you also are not going to have really any major tourist demand there. Okay, so from that standpoint, I don't think it is a great place to be. I think that the place to be is the seaside, and there's a broad range of seaside that you could take a look at. Some people look at Budva, which is kind of like very resorty, more, it's kind of the most lively place. Some people can look at Kotor, which is the historic old town, beautiful area. And there's some surrounding small towns there. Some people look at Tivat, where they've had quite a bit of growth since Porto Montenegro started there. You could look at Herceg-Novi, which I'm filming from right now. You could look at, and then there's some other places as well that you can go down closer to the Albanian border. My perspective is, I think that you have to kind of look at what it is that you're doing here. So what you're doing here, if you're buying a property to live in, of course, that's its whole own thing. If you're buying to rent it out, then what's your situation? Your situation is going to be that you're renting almost exclusively to tourists. You wouldn't really want to rent to locals because it's just, it's a relatively poor country, right? If people are not making a lot of money, they don't have a lot of money to pay for rent, etc., that's not likely to go up dramatically. A lot of people own their own houses, so it's not really, I don't think that's the optimal market. I think the optimal market is to rent to tourists. And what that means is that you have a limited tourist season during which you're going to rent. Now, depending on where you go is going to vary based on who your tourists are. Okay, so as I mentioned, for example, I'm in Herceg-Novi. This is more where like Serbians, Bosnians, people like this tend to come. And so you'll get a lot of these apartments that you can rent out a bunch of small units. That's perfectly fair. There's some places that are kind of more villas, but you'll typically get that more in some of the other areas. So, okay, that's one part of it, right? Is to say who's your typical renter going to be. The second thing to consider is, of course, like I said, the length of the season. And the season, you kind of have to realize, is going to be fairly short, which means you're probably going to have a lot of vacancy throughout the non-tourist season, which, pros and cons. I guess it's less management, but also less revenue, right? So you kind of have to amortize your earnings from 4 or 5 months across the entire 12-month period. So that's something that's worth keeping in mind. Now, within these, in my view, there's a bunch of new developments. There's Porto Novi is the most recent one. They built the first one and only resort in Europe there, kind of cool. There is Porto Montenegro, there's Lucica Bay. You could go down to Budva, there's Duckley Gardens. There's, some of these where they're selling property for pretty expensive, right? You can spend a few million euros on some sort of a unit. I think that's super overpriced, okay? What I see in the market when I kind of take a look around is you can get, around slightly over 1,000 euros a square meter for some older places. And then you can pay 5,000 a square meter for nice new places. To me, I just look at that and I just see this differential. And I'm like, the opportunity here, in my opinion, is to buy older places in geographically constrained areas where you have long-term and growing tourist demand, right? It's kind of attractive that you're going to get, in my opinion, the people who are going to be willing to pay more. So, tourists from Western Europe, wherever else that they're going to be, like I said, they're willing to pay more, right? Maybe Russians, wherever, right? Whoever's going to be not, you're not looking for the person who's going to pay 20 to 40 euros a night. You're looking for the person who's going to pay, a few hundred a night. And by the way, one advantage of some of these areas is there is quite a shortage of luxury property. So, for example, here in Herceg-Novi, there's basically the Pullman Bay Hotel, which is pretty much the only, kind of luxury. It's not really that luxury, but luxury property in Herceg-Novi. So now they have down in Genovici, which is kind of the far end of Herceg-Novi. Like I said, you have this one and only resort, but that's going to be, extremely the other end, right? So in that mid-range area, there's some opportunities to have some property that you can rent out to somebody, which is pretty good. So I think what you can do is you can go and you can buy a property here that is an older property in a good location, and then you can fix it up. And this can increase the value that you're going to get in terms of rent and the sale price. Whether you do that right away or whether you wait to do it later, I think both of those things are reasonable options. It's just the fact that there's such geographic constraint here. I look at it now, granted, this is, this was more bullish, I would say, pre-corona. Nowadays, there's kind of a lag time where obviously the tourism is down, but I think long-term tourism is not going to go away. My basic thesis is 10 years from now, there will not be less tourists than there are today. There will be more. 20, 30 years out, there will be more. So investing in great locations that are going to be able to have that upside, I think is a reasonably safe bet if you buy well, if you manage well, if you follow kind of the fundamental principles of investing in real estate. So for me, if I was to compare here to, parts of Serbia, probably even parts of Croatia, honestly, a lot of Croatia, I find there is just much more space than there is in Montenegro. There's just not a lot of space here. And I think that it's a place that, although right this year, it's been down because of travel restrictions, I think over a 10-year period, it's a pretty bullish outlook. I think you see that in the fact that, it was Azerbaijani investors who did, I think it was Porto Novi. Porto Montenegro, I think, was done by UAE investors. Basically, large luxury real estate developers, investors are putting money here. And I think that kind of tells you something about the market. So anyway, you can take it for what it is. If you're interested in, these sorts of things, where to look for great opportunities, where to get residencies, citizenships, international structuring, corporation formation, international tax planning, etc., you can book a call with me. There's a link below, clarity.fm/Michael Rosmer. Check out our other videos. You can check out our websites, offshorecitizen.net, offshorecapitalist.com. I will see you guys on the next video.